Okay, welcome to my 7th ever podcast and my 5th now. This is my 5th Hot Topic podcast. This is also a Patio Podcast. And so we're looking at the Olympics, which is a mountain range on the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State. And that's the Puget Sound, the body of water. And you can see part of the street. My car on the bottom right is a Toyota Corolla. There goes a car on the road, so there's a road. And then there's a wee maple tree on the lower left, if you're watching the video. And so the topic of this Hot Topic video is, and I'm not sure how to pronounce the name, and why do I bring this up? Because, okay, I was debating when I got to the University of Hawaii at Manoa. I was debating on whether to take Portuguese or Spanish, and I sat in on Portuguese very briefly, but I didn't get to the vocab part. I think it was one day, and I was like, I'm going back to Spanish. But it's César Cielo, I think, and Cielo, and at least in Spanish that means sky, so far as I can recall. I don't know if that's the same in Portuguese or not. Well, the topic of this video is César Cielo and 50-meter freestyle world record, how it played out in my life. And so I need to think of an abbreviated or shortened version of that for my video title. So put that on my back burner for this moment. And so how did that play out in my life? And so I'm going to describe a little bit, start by describing the context I was coming from, because someone who, let's say, works for a sport television channel or something like that as like a broadcaster, but hasn't swam or wasn't actively swimming on like swim teams or something like that, especially if you're young, would have a very, like, if they're not young, they might have a very different perspective, than someone like me, who I was swimming on a summer swim team that same year, like every summer I was at that point, and then I was also on my high school swim team. So I was part of 2 swim teams, and then the teams I participated on, we had club swimmers and stuff like that. And so I was very much in the kind of, how to put it, very much in the swimming world. And so when I've hear people talk about this and the 50-meter world record being set in 2009 by César Cielo, I have found that people may have had a very drastically different experience than I had. And so it kind of, I would say it was a bit of a build-up to him breaking the world, and I would actually say he broke the world record, but he also set the world record. And what I mean by that is, if there are 2 ways to set a record. I've set records in the, if I'm recalling correctly, the 50-yard breaststroke and 1,000-yard freestyle for a swim team I swam at, the Dale Turner Family YMCA Orcas. In that context, it just means I was the first person to swim the race and like in a race and finish and get a time, and at least one of those was broken so fast after I set the record that it didn't even get put on the computer online. And so if you look online for the record, you won't find it because it was broken so soon after I set the record, but it exists on paper documentation. And then the other one, so that was one of them, and the other one lasted a little bit longer. It was later broken. But so I've set records myself in the 50-yard breaststroke and the 1,000-yard freestyle and the team had just started out and stuff. But the other way to set a record, so that's one way of setting a record, in my experience setting records. And then the other way to set a record is, I would classify it as what César Cielo did in 2009. And that means that they break the world record, and they break the record by such an extent, and they're so fast that people cannot break their record for a certain amount of time. And it's been, so he set the record on December 18th, the 18th of December 2009. So that's over 11 years ago that he set this record. And so that's why I'm using the terminology. If I interchange the terms set and break record, like break means the day he set, like, he broke the world record and made a new record, and then set a world record that has stood the test of time. So if someone set a record and then, or broke a world record, making a new world record, and then the next day broke their own world record, I would not consider the first breaking a world record setting a record, because it was immediately broken, kind of thing. And so there's a nuance there, and that's different than being the first person to swim in a race and set a record like I have done. And so getting back to César Cielo and his incredible swim, was the 2008 Olympics. He swam so far as I can recall, and I remember it because I remember his name, and so, but everybody else was like Team Lezak, and I don't even know if he swam the 50-meter freestyle, but like everybody like was kind of Team USA, and I kind of followed certain swimmers, like the individual matters to me kind of more than every single person on the team, regardless of their character, kind of thing. And so a bunch of guys were like super like, oh my gosh, the world record. So before the 2008 Beijing Summer Olympic Games, the world record had already been set, or I should say, not set, broken from a swimmer from Australia, and I think his name is Eamon Sullivan. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And so going into the Beijing Summer Olympic Games, it was a big deal because in the swimming community that I was a part of, so the summer team, I don't know if I was on the YMCA team at that point in time, but yeah, and then high school teams and that kind of thing, and water polo and everything kind of, was I on water polo 2008? That was 2009. Okay, anyway, moving forward, the swimming community and aquatics community, including water polo, was alive and this was a big kind of like, someone broke this record, because the record before Eamon Sullivan broke it was set, another set record, meaning it stood the test of time. That was from Alexander Popov from Russia, and he set it in June 2000. So it had been around for a while. And so there was the 50-meter freestyle is like an event where it's not quite at the level of track and field in the Olympic Games, where records will last for decades, like 5-6 decades, that kind of thing. Like, you know, a sport is mature when records last for decades, and an event is mature when events last for decades, that kind of thing. When there's a bunch of turnover in what the world record is, it's like, okay, there's still a lot of room for improvement in this sport, that kind of thing, and in this event. And I've learned that in multiple sports, so it's not just track and field and it's not just swimming, but that's true for usually speed sports. Sports that require skill and precision, and you're evaluated and judged on like sportsmanship, so stuff like fencing, where sportsmanship is actually evaluation criteria, that becomes a lot harder to assess the quality of athletes compared to the past, because it's not just, oh, they ran faster or swam faster. And so yeah, and so there was this build up at the Beijing Summer Olympics. People got way too into the Beijing Summer Olympics. I actually stopped watching swimming. That was the first Olympics where I actually stopped watching swimming, because so many people would watch it. And then like, I worked at a pool, I swam, I taught, like there was a bunch of like, I might have done water polo that summer, I don't remember, but there was like, I was fully in on the kind of like in the swimming world, and it was just too much for me. And so I actually stopped watching swimming for the first time at the 2008 Summer Olympic Games, because people would just watch it and then talk about it, and it was like, okay, if I watch it, I don't also want to have this be the topic of conversation for the next 3 weeks of my life. So I was like, okay, well, it can be a topic of conversation, but I don't have to have unnecessary redundancy by watching it and then having to talk about something that I didn't want to talk about in the first place, because the talking about thing I'm gonna have to do no matter what. So I just won't watch it. So I didn't watch it. I did after there was a bunch of kind of breaking of the 50-meter freestyle record in 2008 itself and lead up to the Olympic Games. And so that was a big deal. And then it was a big deal that that record, world record, was not broken at the Summer Olympic Games in 2008. And then it got broken in 2009 by somebody from France, whose name I absolutely cannot pronounce. Frédéric Bosquet or something like that. That's my best guess. And then in December 2009, César Cielo from Brazil, so that's why I brought up Portuguese earlier and Spanish earlier. From Brazil, he broke the old world record and set a new world record in December 2009. And so that was a really big deal. And I remember, I rooted for him at the Summer Olympic Games in 2008. And everybody was like, why the heck are you choosing this guy? And part of it was just like, he came across as having a really good attitude. And I really liked the name. So like my last name, my last name Leonhardi, the last half of the name is Hardy, H-A-R-D-I, and it roughly translates in English to hardy, like hardiness. And hardiness means you're dynamic and you can change in in any environment. So even in a changing environment, you can change. That's kind of what it means to be brave and hardy. And so I really liked the name Cielo because I was like, it's kind of a perfect name, especially for something like swimming, and especially for a race like the 50-meter freestyle, where when it does mature, it's kind of anybody's game as to who wins. And he just kind of dominated the field, and I was like, I really like that last name because you think about it, sometimes it's blue skies, sometimes the skies are cloudy, and so the skies can kind of dictate or help in understanding and predicting, if you want to call it predicting, the outcome of this race. And so I really liked it, and I got a lot of flack for supporting him at the 2008 Summer Olympic Games. And so it actually came back around on the pool deck because I supported this guy in the 2008 Summer Olympic Games, and they're like, are you aware that he just broke the 50-meter world record in freestyle and stuff? And I was like, woohoo! Because I rooted for this guy. And then he went and broke it, and so I would say it was almost, it was a really peculiar thing. We got an aircraft coming. I don't know if you can see the helicopter. We'll see if it flies in front of the camera. This helicopter is video bombing this podcast, this HoT Topic podcast. You guys, look, it's so HoT Topic. We got a news crew. Wave to the news crew. Wave to the news crew. All right, I waved. And so, yeah, and I got so much heat for supporting this athlete from Brazil, and it was a really peculiar thing. You think there were a bunch of people who I would say how it kind of came down to is there were a lot of swimmers with Olympic aspirations, Olympic game aspirations, who really like having athletes perform, and then they really liked Michael Phelps because it was oh, it'd be fun to beat that someday. They really like athletes that they can beat, and I'm the opposite. I like athletes that no, I cannot do what they do, or they have a really great personality, or they swim my stroke, but they do a really good job swimming my stroke. So it has nothing to do with whether I can beat them or not. And so I just really like this guy, and I just remember getting so much flack and so much pushback for supporting him, and then he broke the world record, and it was seriously, this is the guy that breaks the world record? This is not Tanis's guy, but that was kind of the stigma, was this is the one that she rooted for, and he's the one that set the world record. What the heck, man? So it was just a really weird kind of experience. I would say, if anything, so what was the time? So I'm going off of the Wikipedia article, so I'm trusting that they got this right. But César Cielo from Brazil broke the former world record in the 50-meter freestyle long course and set a new one and the time was 20.91 seconds. And he said on the 18th of December 2009 at the CBDA Open Brazilian Championships in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Sao Paulo, Brazil. And so, yeah, that's kind of how it played out. It was a bunch of build-up to people expecting it being the world record 50 meter feet, and this is in men's, I should say. César Cielo is a man, he's a male, and this is the men's division and men's event. And so there was a bunch of build-up. So this is my final recap, kind of and recap is short for like recapitulation or something like that. So I'm gonna cover what the synopsis, I guess is another word. It was a bunch of build-up because before the 2008 Beijing Summer Olympic Games, the former record that was set in 2000, and it meets my standard for setting a record of one type. And so this previous world record was set in 2000 at the Russian Olympic trials, and then leading up to the 2008 Summer Olympic Games, the 50 meter freestyle long course men was broken, and there was a bunch of breaking of these records. Like, it was really fast turnover. A bunch of people, or not a bunch of people, but a few people were breaking this record repeatedly. And there were like 4 times I'm looking at. And so then everybody was like, oh, it's gonna be broken at the Olympic Games, it's gonna be broken at the Olympic Games, and it was not. And so that was just kind of, it was anti-climactic in a sense, but I saw my swimmer do well at the Summer Olympic Games. And then in 2008, César Cielo, he was the dude I was rooting for. And then a little under a year and a half later, so about less than a year and a half later, César Cielo, my swimmer, with one person in between, broke and set the world record. And then everybody was like, come on, because at that point in my life, I was getting a lot of things right. I still get things right, but not like, I try to get things wrong because that helps me grow and that kind of stuff. But at that point in my life, I got a lot of things right. And so people were kind of like, seriously, she got this one right too. This isn't even her race, man, which it wasn't. And so it was really, really exciting to see that this person I had supported at the 2008 Summer Olympic Games win in the sense of he broke and set a new world record that now has lasted for over 11 years. So that's very incredible. And that's kind of how it played out in my life. César Cielo and the 50 meter freestyle men's world record, and how it played out in my life. And I guess, is there anything else I need to go back and touch on for clarity's sake? There's 2 types of setting records by my standards. The first is being the first person on a team to swim a race. I've set 2 of those records myself in the 50-yard breaststroke and the 1,000-yard freestyle. And then the second type of setting a record is breaking a world record. So the new time, so setting a record is the new time, and that time lasts for, I would probably say, about 8 years. Roughly, it could be like maybe like closer to like maybe 6 or more years. There's a gap there. It's like not like days to weeks to months kind of. It's years kind of time frame that I would say was setting a record. And why am I pointing that out? Because some people say, like, as soon as a world record is broken, they say that a new world record is set. And my definition is a little more nuanced than that. I have a little bit different of a standard. I would say someone who does not set a world record, they break the former one and they make a new world record. It's not set until a certain amount of time has passed. Like, just like thinking about, I'm a geologist and here comes the geology analogy. So in rivers carry sediment, so like really fine particles of dirt and stuff like that. And it takes time. If the water's really turbulent, the smaller particles aren't going to come out of that water and be deposited and make mud and stuff like that. So you need calmer waters And I mean, it might, but it might take a long time kind of thing. But like if it's calm waters, these fine particles of sediment can fall, like settle out of the water. So that's the, I'm using a Earth standard, geology standard for my definition of setting a record and the breaking a record and defining a new record and having it stand the test of time. To set a world record, it requires time by my standards, because that's just, well, it's actually analogous to a natural process in the world, on the planet we live in, on planet Earth. So I think that's really cool. It's got really, okay, random. Well, not random, but I took it there, you guys. I took it to geology.